I hear that you have a counter argument that you've been spending the equivalent of 2 days working on mentally, day and night.
You are such a backstab. How can you stab me like this? That, like, you look me in the eye and then you go...
That's not a backstab. It's fundamentally not a backstab.
I don't know, whatever. You stab people. It's mean.
You're facing me and stabbing me in the back. The book we're doing today is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. And this is a book that we have a little bit of differing opinions on, I think. So that'll be a little fun. But Ellen, who is Joe Abercrombie, and have you read his work before?
Yes, indeed. I've read his book. This is the beginning of his third trilogy that he's published with Gollancz. The first two take place in his rather famous First Law World, Third World Law World. Welcome. It's evening time. I can barely talk.
Joe Abercrombie is probably best known for the First Law trilogy, the Blade itself. Then They Were Hanged. Those books. That's probably where you know him from. This is the start of his first book series in that world after 13 books.
No, it's not.
It's one of his first after the 13 in that world. And this is The Devils takes place in kind of an alternate Europe where Jesus was a woman and there's magic and stuff and bloody cannibalistic elves. And why I brought up who the author was is that Ellen is a huge fan of his other work.
Don't you do that. Don't you sell me out like that. But you're also kind of right.
We had previously on the channel read the Blade itself, which is his very first book, which I thought was promising, but had a lot of structural issues, which come down to the fact that it's his first book. You could tell just a lot of the problems were he didn't quite know exactly where to start the story. But I was like, okay, I'd like to read something else by him at some point. And so when this came out, I believe Ellen was saying that we had to read it or our friendship was over. So that's why we're here.
Wow, that's funny. I do not remember that. Strange. Yeah. Is this the definition of gaslighting?
So before we start, very quickly, what's the premise of The Devils?
I think you've already done it, my dear. The world is roughly high medieval times, and Europe is in a time of strife. There are currently 2 popes and a schism in the church, where one side of the church believes that the Savior has been born and the Savior was a woman. And now the Savior is reborn in the form of a 10-year-old girl who they have raised to pope, which the Eastern Bloc, think is some kind of heresy. And there are currently some tensions going on, some warring, Middle Ages. And the Holy Land has been lost to a race of cannibalistic elves who think it is their sacred duty to eat all the humans, which really does sound like a good idea, doesn't it? If you consider what we're doing to the earth. We read Strange Dark Shore yesterday about how humans are slowly poisoning the planet. Anyhow, back to The Devils. The book begins when Brother Diaz. I'm not racist. I'm not racist. I'm just bad with names.
He's Spanish. He's not Hispanic, so it's okay. It's not racist.
He is ambitious, let's say. And he has been talking himself up an awful lot and hoping for a better position in the church where he can get the recognition he so much feels he deserves. So when he is summoned to the Pope, he practically runs there. And in the first chapter of the book, we see him stressing to meet the Pope, and is instead summoned to the Cardinal and gets saddled with a rather thankless job.
That's correct. He becomes the warden of a group of outcasts who are controlled by the church called the Devils. Those are the eponymous name group.
It's the 13th chapel, the Chapel of the Holy Expediency, which I think is a funny name.
Yeah, that is. He gets some mileage out of that. The other plot line is that there's a girl called Alex who was a street urchin, but was found by her uncle who says she's now going to be the Empress of the Eastern block of Christendom, and like they have, and the devils are the ones
whose seat of power is in Troy,
right, and who are going to be going over. And the devils are the ones who are contracted to protect her to get her there so that she can bring the churches together before the elves start doing their elvesy shit again. In case you think that's like a glass of cognac or some kind of fancy European drink, that is Coke. So don't feel bad about your lives. None of us have them together.
Coca-Cola.
Overall, what were your thoughts on the book? And then I'll talk about my thoughts. Because again, like I had hinted at earlier, very subtly, we had a bit of a split of opinion here.
See, William is a feminist. He believes in letting the women say their little bit before he explains to us all how the book really is.
It's like a test. I like to see if you can get it right, and then I'll tell you how the truth objectively.
Our friendship is at stake here. If I should mess up, then if I mess up this, guys, and you never see me again, you all know what happened.
Your internship is on thin ice. Okay, go ahead.
I thought the book was fine. It is very long. It is 19 hours. The audiobook is 19 hours, which translates roughly into 580 pages or something, I would assume. And it did not need to be that long. All that said, I did have a good time.
I will say that I had a lot of fun for the first third. I was like, this isn't the best, but like Abercrombie is having a fun time. I'm having a fun time. This is pretty good. Like, this is fun. And it's kind of like pulpy. And then the book is just about twice as long as it needs to be. And a lot of his writing kind of starts to wear on after a while. And we get into these circular, like, things that happen that are like, okay, one character, or actually all the characters win all their fights the same way. So yeah, actually that's a good microcosm of it. The first fight is really well written. It like gives you character, it's kind of exciting, and it really grounds you in the world. And then there's like 3 more mini bosses before they get to Troy. And I was like, okay, they're all winning these fights the same way. They're all fighting these fights the same way. There's no real like tension here. It's taking too long. And so I think that's really going to be the big divide, is that like I found Abercrombie's Abercrombieisms more grating over time than Ellen did, who I think you kind of were like, oh, this is pleasant to read through all the way.
Yes. As opposed to, well, I'm a benign ruler, let's say.
Okay, things need to get done, and if it takes a tyrant of good taste, like in my case, then that is how it will have to be.
To be fair, I feel like Abercrombie is hitting that part of his authorship where he is becoming the new Stephen King, where he phones up his editor and he's like, hey dude, I've got a new book coming. And they're like, oh yeah, sure Joe, that's great. Could you make it less than 600 pages? And he's like, sorry buddy, I'm not sure if I can do that. That these stories, they just practically write themselves. The story's gotta go what the story's gotta go. And the editor is like, okay, fine. We can probably sell it. You're worth the extra mileage, Joe. Can we just not have that much swearing in this one? And can we be a little broader in our jokes? Like, it doesn't all have to be about piss and sex. And Joe's like, yeah, sure. I can totally do that. And then he hangs up, and then he just goes and writes whatever he wants. And it becomes more than 600 pages, and the jokes are all about sex.
It really is true. It's very within his wheelhouse. And I feel like there was a certain amount of promise of greater things to come in the Blade itself that I read. When I read it, that I got the impression of. So, for example, Jezebel's point of view had like, it was really funny, and even just like the way he described things was very much specific to that character.
You mean Giselle?
Well, he was a Jezebel, but yes, Giselle's. I'll always remember there's a really funny part where like the king pukes on his shoes, and he's mostly like, ugh, and they ruined my day. And there were like little things like that made his viewpoint very distinctive. Whereas in this book, we get like 9 viewpoints, and none of them feel that much more distinctive than the others. And I didn't quite see what their use was. There's a lot of that in the book of just Abercrombie having a fun time with what he's writing, but it maybe not leading to the strongest book it could. I really contrasted this with two other works in my brain while I was reading it, which isn't really the book's fault, but it's just a quirk of what we'd been reading. Is that we read Between Two Fires a few months ago, which also was a like religious, we're going on a quest to the holy city kind of a narrative. And in that book, like that one's much more grounded, even as like the heaven and hell demons are kind of Lord of the Rings-esque, but there's no like overt magic systems like there is in this book. And also that book like actually was trying to make an effort to make people feel like they were from that time period. Like people actually believe their religion, whereas basically nobody in this book believes their religion, which again is a fine choice for Abercrombie to make. But I found it to be a little bit annoying after having read that book that I thought got a lot of mileage out of that thematically. And then also I just was contrasting it a lot with Trench Crusade, which is a tabletop miniature setting that I've been immersed in recently, which is like very cool and grim, dark and gory. And it's not the book's fault; it couldn't be that cool, but it did take away from it a little bit because I kept expecting cool stuff.
What Will is saying is that this book is too lighthearted for him.
Actually, yeah. That one of the problems is that this book kind of is very lighthearted, and that's okay if it was going to be quick. But after a while, I wanted some stakes. I think also the characters didn't jive with me in the way they did for you.
I don't think it's his best character work. They are all quite stagnant. I think he really peaks with the werewolf character, Vigga. And I'm not just saying that just because she's Swedish, okay?
Yeah, uh-huh.
No, but I do think that you often talk about how you want medieval fantasy novels to be a certain level of historic, a certain level of believable, and how this just doesn't even try to hit on that. It's not trying to talk about religion in a high medieval alternate past of Europe, even though it takes place in Europe. This is religion seen with a very modern view after the fact, because nowadays we tend to talk about how the church hoarded wealth and hoarded lands and caused a lot of strife and wars and segregated people, like divided them from their families, forced people into cloisters and all that. And that is what this book likes to talk about. It's doing the hey guys, isn't this crazy, eh? It's winking at you, and Will is like, no, I don't like flirtation. No, stop.
Not accepting someone else winking at me is like the most me thing possible of just going, no. I think the thing is, I do think there is a certain amount of fun that can be had with these are just the trappings of medieval over a normal story or normal characters. Like we're just gonna have it. It's gonna be a little Ren Fair-y, but that's fine. But like for me, I just didn't see that the book did anything else particularly noteworthy with those with the characters, and I feel like it could have added some. Like if we had one character that was religious, it would have helped so much contrast everybody else's apostateness.
Yes, I will say that if the plot was stronger and the characters were stronger, I do think the tone would have hit. It's just that there is not enough to back it up. And that I will agree with you with, even if I did have a better time with this book than you did. So, shall we get to the plot?
Before that, though, very quickly, for this channel as a whole, do we have what you would call a Patreon?
Sometimes. You're a real butthole. Katie isn't here, so I'm just going to say it today.
Well, and you're also going to say the other part she has trouble with.
In case this is the first time you're tuning in, Unresolved Textual Tension does indeed have a patron. On the first tier, you get access to the lovely Discord community, a very active, very welcoming, warm place where we talk about everything between heaven and earth. And you get early access to all William's lovely videos, where you can see us gab at each other and make rude jokes, which is great, isn't it? The second patron tier is the book club, where you get to read 2 books every month with us. One is picked by Will, and it's the mid-month book, which is summed up with a live stream where you can comment and share your thoughts. The second book per month is the book club book, which the patrons, which means you, nominate and vote for. So we all do it collectively. We read the book, and then we do yet another live stream. We talk about it. We laugh. We highlight comments. It's a great time. The third tier is the Parasocial Darlings tier, where every month Katie and Will have a little extra stream where they go into the macro. Or is it the micro? I can never keep those apart. They take a very close look at prose and analyze it sentence by sentence. So for all you prospective writers out there, this is for you. We have looked at everything from Sarah J. Maas to Hemingway. It's a good time. Come join us.
As someone who was a Patreon member for like 3 years, would you recommend it as a testimonial? Would you say this is a good value?
Absolutely. If you're like me, you have tried to find good book clubs in your local area, and it just hasn't worked because everyone reads books and have absolutely nothing of importance to say. Well, in our book club, we are packed with smart people who actually likes to analyze literature. And we have very diverse tastes. All opinions are welcome. We try to listen to each other. We get good feedback, and we have a great time. So yeah, it's well worth it.
And then I decide who's right. Okay, jumping into the novel. This book, as we said, starts with Brother Diaz going through the holy city of...
They mostly refer to it as the holy city. The holy city. We are somewhere in... we are somewhere in France.
Okay, so basically in this world, instead of Rome becoming a major power, Carthage became a major power. And so that's why Troy is like their Constantinople, essentially, and why Rome is like not really a city of any import. So yeah, you're correct. We're somewhere in France. For a while, I was like, wait, are we starting in Carthage? Because then that would make sense with Rome as a holy city and the remnants of the empire, but we're not. So, okay. Yes. France. The Brother Diaz is going through the streets and he's like, oh shit, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just a guy who didn't really want to join the church and I don't really care about God that much, and I thought this place was going to be great, and it's not.
But he's also excited because these last few months he has been scheming, he has been puffing his own, blowing his own horn, he's been puffing himself up, he has been doing legal things and paperwork things that he is good at, and he thinks that finally someone has noticed, and maybe it's going to pay off. So he's in this horse-drawn carriage and he is just sweating his balls off because the streets are packed with people. So the carriage is completely stagnant. We are having rush hour traffic even though we're in medieval city times, because today is one of the Holy Saints' Day and people are out to receive the blessings and, get cured of their ailments and all those things that people did in the past. And sometimes in America nowadays.
And this is Abercrombie's very patented deconstruction. You think you go to the holy city and it's all pious, but actually it's a mess. And that's actually just also very realistic. Large cities, especially if you've been in a smaller agrarian city, seem huge and stinky. And that's pretty, that's pretty normal. And Brother Diaz, right from the start, I was like, okay, this is a pretty good start. But I wish that he had actually been a little bit more actually religious, again, to contrast with some of the people who aren't. Because right from the beginning, he's just like, yeah, I don't super believe in all of this. I'm just a bit of a schemer trying to get ahead. And
I would like to argue that he is rather religious. He is just religious in that sense that he didn't really want to be a monk. He wanted to be a God-fearing lawyer type of person.
He's not unreligious, and he's not like, oh, fuck God, but he doesn't really believe in it too much. And we'll talk about that more as we go. Basically, he gets to where he thinks the Pope is going to talk to him, but it's not the Pope, it's Saint Bernard. That is not her name, but
Cardinal Jishka.
Cardinal Jishka, close. Who is like a very no-nonsense woman. And one of the things you'll learn about this world is their Jesus was a woman. And instead of making the cross, they make this wheel as their symbol. And one assumes that this is why they like have so much women clergy, is because if the savior was a woman. At least here in the Western side of Christendom. And she is like, well, actually, we have a new job for you. Your job will be to be the head of the Church of the Holy Expediency. And there's also some like swarthy people around.
The 13th chapter, the Church of the Holy Expediency, and right away he's like, excuse me, isn't there 12 chapters of the church? So right away he hasn't heard of this 13th chapter. And
so you're like, okay, cool. And there's some other, like, again, some swarthy characters who kind of give them a little bit of a rough time for being so sheltered. And then we also get, at about the same time, Alex. Alex is being a street urchin, you know, I was going to say David Copperfield style, but that's not correct. It's some other reference.
She is currently trying to outrun her debts, and she's kind of failing because the debts and the debt collectors are actively catching up with her. So they like stop her in the street and they haul her down, and they're like, so you going to pay? And she's like, I don't have any money, but I'll pay you tomorrow, I swear. And in her mind, she's thinking, there's no way I can pay them tomorrow. I have no money. I should not have racked up all those debts. So they're like, you know the rules, girl. What's it going to be? Is it going to be a little finger or an ear that we're going to cut off? And she's just about to choose when this nobleman shows up. And he's like, unhand the Princess Alexia Paragenitus. And they're like, excuse me, what did you say? And he's like, let go of her. And it turns out that he has been looking for his lost niece. He is the brother of the slain Empress of Troy, who during the coup that killed his sister, she had a daughter who was ferried away for safekeeping and was somehow lost on the way, and he has spent all this time looking for her. And now he's like, that's you, Alexia. And she's like, what? I'm no one. I'm a fucking street urchin. And he's like, do you have a medallion? That's half a coin. And she's like, yeah, I've got this here. And he's like, yep, look, here I have one. And he has the other side of the coin, and she's like, oh, maybe this guy isn't completely full of shit. And meanwhile, these thugs are like, what's this fucker on about? Why should we care, dude? Our boss just wants his money. So the man is like, yeah, sure, I'll pay you a little bit. He throws a few coins on the ground, and they're like, is this what a prince's life is worth? And he's like, no, it's what your lives are worth. Then Alexia goes with him.
Is it ever explained how he actually found her? Okay, because that was never, that to me was never clear. If there was like, how did he know she had a birthmark behind her ear? Was like kind of an element of the book that I thought was going to be revealed at some point, and it never actually is.
He knew the original Alexia, obviously. I don't know how he picked her out of the crowd, really. Spoiler reasons, I shan't go more into it right now. We'll talk about it later again.
But you immediately are like, okay, this is too pat. This is too much of a high fantasy trope. He's going to subvert this down the line. And he plays it straight for pretty much the whole book until the twist that you expected happens. Back to Brother Diaz. Brother Diaz is brought to some kind of like little cloister.
He's brought into a chapel, and he's like, whoa, this is the grandeur I've been waiting my entire life for. The roof is gilt and vaulted with beautiful paintings of the saints. And he's like, yes, this is my comeuppance. And then they open kind of a hatch in the floor leading down to a dark and dreary dungeon. And he's like, what? And they're like, we're going down here. You're not going to spend any time up here, lad.
And this is where we meet the devils. So let's run through the characters pretty quick because they are kind of the most important part of this book. The two that had led him here is Baptiste, who's like just a an adventure chick who has done a lot of stuff.
Pirate adventure chick who has a finger in every single pie. No matter what they do, she's like, oh, I actually spent a summer doing this before.
Exactly. And she should have stopped after Cabo. And then we have the other guy who had led them in, who's like an old knight, and his name is Jakob. And we'll just say what their magical abilities are. What's happening to your face?
You said the wrong city. She should have.
Yeah, it's Barcelona, but I thought Cabo
Barcelona
was funnier. Yeah, I thought Cabo was funnier. And what we find out is that he is basically unable to be killed. He's been around for like 200 years. He was fought on in the Crusades. He had a wife that was a witch that cursed him with eternal life. And he can get killed. He gets like mortally wounded and it hurts, but he just keeps going. And what happens is the other devils, except for these two, are under a magical binding. That means that they can't like go against what the church says. But him and Baptiste are just like around to shepherd the cats, so to speak.
We find out that the other of the devils are convicted criminals against God. So they are compelled by a new magic spell every time they get sent out on a mission.
He's very solidly like the old knight. I thought he was going to be deconstructed or subverted more as a character, but he's pretty just straightforwardly old grim knight who has to keep to his vows, kind of a thing. Like he's done some things in his past.
Yeah, he used to be young and he used to believe in chivalry and he used to believe in his own edification and the glory of the valiant fight and all that. And now he has seen it all and done it all, and now, or most of all, he would just like to die, but since he can't, he is using his time to try and set right some of the wrong he did.
Gotta go back once more into the battle and do the right thing. And then we get to the actual like devils who are like not good people. One of whom is Balthazar Gelt. He is like very specifically a wizard and not a sorcerer.
Balthazar Sham Ivan Draxi.
Balthazar Gelt is a Warhammer reference. Who is very pompous. He is the best wizard and necromancer, or the third best wizard and necromancer in Europe.
He's one of the top 3 foremost necromancers in Europe. He's a magician, and it's very important that you call him a magician, which no one will ever do.
They keep calling him wizard, and he's like, long suffering. He, pretty much all of these people except for Baptiste, and one we'll get to, have viewpoints. But his viewpoint is very kind of pompous in that way. And his thing is like, he really doesn't want to be here. He's going to break the binding and get out of this whole stupid quest thing.
He was convicted of necromancy and consorting with devils. And one of his opening comments is that, seriously, you commune with one single devil, and that is all anyone will ever talk about.
The book very much has that kind of sense of humor of like, these are very archetypal characters, but it's fun, you know? And the banter is like very Abercrombie, and it's like light. And I found I had a problem after a while that all the characters make the same kind of jokes to each other. And it's all really interchangeable, but at least for a little bit, it's fun. It's fun too, even if there's only one authorial voice. If the authorial voice is fun, it's fun to be there with them. It's really, again, the problem is that this book is twice as long as it should be. Then the next one we meet is, we don't meet her yet. We'll meet her in a little bit, the Swedish
Next we meet an old man. An old, grizzled, grey-haired, long, naked man who immediately addresses Brother Diaz. He's like, hello, I am Baron.
I remember none of their names. I finished this like a week ago. He's a vampire, and his thing is that he like can kind of seduce people with his voice, and he gets younger when he drinks blood. But when he does the seduction with the voice or turns into bats, it drains him pretty quickly, and he becomes old. And he almost gets Brother Diaz to come to the bars, and he talks about his wife's dumplings a lot, and she was the one who turned him in Eastern Europe. He's like one of the 2 characters that we don't get a viewpoint on, which is fine. He's not a lot really happens with him. And then the next character, I don't know if
Baron
we meet her
Rickard.
now.
I looked it up because I take this stuff seriously.
She's a professional, you guys. And then do we meet Sunny here, or do we meet her later?
We do not, because she can't be seen in the Holy City since she's guess what, guys? She's an elf. But she also has this really nifty ability where if she holds her breath, it's like no one notices her. It's not quite invisibility, it's just that she passes beneath everyone's notice.
It's stealth mode. And she was in a circus for a long time, and people like yelled at her and pelted at her, and she's like very broken down, but is like, oh, this is life. I gotta keep going. I don't know why people don't like me. I'd like to be a person, but I'm not. She won't shut the fuck up about it, but...
People really hate the elves because the elves have, at this point in time, the elves have stolen the Holy Land. And they have, in the past, there has been like holy wars against the elves. And whole cities have been eaten and left dead after the elves have been there. So people are very angry, very hateful, and very afraid of the elves.
And this is probably a good time to complain about it. I didn't like that they were elves. I kept expecting there to be some reason that they were a named fantasy race. And there isn't. They're just kind of like Abercrombie needed Christendom to have an enemy, and he didn't want it to be Muslims because that would be awkward. So he's like, elves. And like, it's hard to feel scared of them when we're constantly in Sunny's head and she's just a very normal person. It's not like she wants to eat anyone. It's not like she thinks any differently. She apparently has like, comes off as like having like a minor, being a little bit on the tism scale is pretty much all you could really say about how she's like different. In her viewpoint, she has trouble like smiling a little bit, but that's it. It's like, again, it's very normal amounts of neurodivergence.
She's been emotionally abused and shunned her whole life, so she isn't quite socially apt. But I think we don't see it in this book, but I would be very surprised if there isn't a further subversion of the elves further down the line. I think part of the point that he tries to make is that they have Sunny in their midst, and she's been raised among humans, and even though people have been awful to her, she's pretty normal. Like she's not that strange. I'll be very surprised if the elves are just straight up elves, but this is me assuming things that have not been revealed in the book yet. The book plays it as if the elves are just called elves, and they are humanoid, but they are pointy-faced, and their eyes a little too big, and they have pointy ears, which is, very reminiscent of, whatever you think of when someone says elf.
I would love it if they just weren't called elves. Like, literally just the name elves makes it so goofy when he talks about them. And like any kind of like gravitas they build up is ruined by the fact that she's very normal. So like Jakob will talk about how they kind of like they butcher humans and eat them. And that for a moment you're like, oh, that's creepy. This is doing something interesting. And then Sunny comes along and is like, well, I liked everybody, but then they put bees in my face, and blah, 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 blah. And that kind of ruins any gravitas the elves had. It's just goofy to call them elves. I don't know quite why he did that. It doesn't seem to tie into any specific, like...
I think it is to comment on the otherness of a political enemy, because this is medieval Europe, and the Holy Land was something that people have been fighting over for several thousand years, and whoever the enemy is, it is someone other. So I think he made them elves as opposed to in order to make them other without having to make them another nationality. Like, it's not the Russians and it's not the poor Muslims, we're going after them again, but it is still people, probably, that are being called by a name that isn't the name that they refer to themselves as, I think.
But why elves? Why not just a made-up word? That's my problem. Literally, my problem is just the word elf versus like the Dragor or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that it really is just my issue with it. He doesn't get any dividends from it in this book. I guess maybe in later books he will. And it's also weird because it's the one like high fantasy thing. There's no like dwarves or orcs. It's not like he's doing a greater subversion of those kind of fantasy. It's not like he's recontextualizing all of them. It's just elves that he's doing. So that kind of bothered me a little bit.
I do, and I understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's an insane nitpick.
It doesn't ruin the book for me, but it is just an aspect that, like, I'm just so puzzled about why he chose elves specifically, like pointy-eared elves specifically. It's not even like they're like. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it more, but like I could not figure it out. So back to the group. That's all of them except for one who will dramatically reveal in a little bit. And Brother Diaz is, of course, horrified. He's like, how can the church keep such devils? Get it? Because that's what the book is called. You know, under yoke like this. And they're like, well, we're not the church of greatness. We're the church of expediency, or the chapel of expediency, or the chapter of expediency. I can't remember which of the actual titles.
We are the church of the holy expediency.
So it was church. And so, like, you're like, okay, this is a fun setup. This is kind of like a Dirty Dozen kind of like, oh, we're going to go into the trenches with the bad guys who are really anti-heroes kind of a thing. And like, again, for the first third of this book, I'm on board. Like, I'm like, this is fun. This is a lot of fun. His banter is, if you like that kind of banter, is pretty good. These are very kind of broad characters, but they're fun characters. And yeah, so for right now, it's working well. Alex, her uncle is like, he explains to her the political situation where, like, she is the daughter of who was going to be the heir of I'm just going to call it the Eastern Orthodox Empire, because I don't actually remember what it's called in
She is the daughter of the former queen of Troy, who was murdered by her little sister, the traitor queen Eudoxia. And Alex is the lost daughter who must now shoulder the crown, because Eudoxia has died and the throne of Troy is currently empty and open to all sorts of usurpers. Anyone who thinks they have a claim is welcome to present it now. So it is imperative that Alex must rise to her destiny and claim her seat as empress.
And the reason they need the devils to escort her is because Eudoxia did some horrific alchemical experiments where she was trying to find the soul. So she merged humans and animals together. And you're like, oh shit, this is going to be some creepy shit when these animal people show up.
It's not revealed immediately. The reason to why they need the devils right away is because of the schism of the church. So they are essentially going into enemy territory. There has been hostilities and attempts to unite the churches for many hundreds of years since the birth of the great saint.
Eudoxia, though, has 4 sons who are like going to try to stop her. And so it's like, oh, okay, what's going to happen? That's why we need them. So she gets together with Brother Diaz and they start down the road to Troy, and they have a covered wagon with some kind of a cage inside, and she doesn't know what that's about. Is that a Chekhov's wagon cage? It is. And
did you just say Chekhov's cat?
I was trying to say wagon cage at the same time, and it came out cat, and then I thought I could very quickly say wagon cage, and people wouldn't notice. But now you've alerted them to it. Thank you. You can't do finger guns. You don't have guns in Sweden. It's like a finger pacifism.
Hey, I have seen a gun on TV.
Alex starts interacting with the devils, and she starts being like, hey guys, what's up? And like interacting with them a little bit. I don't really remember this part, so I'm gonna be a feminist and let Ellen talk to show that I didn't forget.
Whenever Will finishes talking and he wants me to take over, he is being a stunning feminist and letting the women talk.
Like Resand.
What happens is that Alex is starting to try and make friends with the gang, and people are, like Balthazar is introducing his grievances where he hates this binding and he thinks he's too fine to be enslaved to the Pope, who is, by the way, a 10-year-old girl whose binding was something she threw together like, okay, so until you have reached Troy, you have to do whatever Brother Diaz says, and you also have to be really nice to each other. Otherwise, you'll get terrible indigestion. And then she drew a line on their wrists. And Balthazar is like, I am Balthazar Sham, Ivan Draxi, one of Europe's 3 foremost necromancers. I cannot be submitted to this infamy. So he's already making
It's
plans
a very good impression, by the way.
Thank you. To try and break the binding. And Yakov is just riding in the front, being his, grizzled self. He's like, oh, this is not going to be funny, but we're just going to have to get it through. We're just going to have to do it. And Baron Rickard is just lazing around on the wagon. And, he is the kind of... the philandering character. He does give the impression that he doesn't really take anything seriously. He's very charming, very easygoing. He has good manners, excellent manners. But you can tell that he's a bit. We don't actually know what he is yet, but he's a bit sus, yeah. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, Sunny pops out of nowhere. She's like, "Boy. There's people following us. They're coming up behind us." And Jakob's like, fucking hell already. How many of them? Oh, there's like 11 maybe. And so they go to a chapel, I think, to try to take cover.
I think it's a tavern.
Is it a tavern?
Yeah, because there's like a hot wench there.
Oh, yeah.
I always remember a hot wench.
Go ahead, Will, then, because I didn't remember the hot wench.
They go to a tavern and they get attacked, and it's by the beastmen of I already forgot her name,
Eudoxia's first son.
And he's very poncy. He's like, oh, cousin, I'm going to have to kill you so I can get the throne. And Jakob's like fighting them, and he's not doing great. And Balthazar, this is, I think, one of the first times he tries to escape and realizes he can't. And so he actually has to fight the sorceress they brought with him, who's like a fire sorceress. And things aren't going great, and Jakob gets stabbed. And I was like, and this is before he's immortal. So I was like, oh, okay, is this going to be a subversion where like the cool knight we thought was going to be with us the whole time dies? And the inversion is no, he comes back to life. But the important part is like they're about to lose, and then they get from the cabin, from the cage of the wagon. I tried to combine those two words. The Varwolf. And the Varwolf is a werewolf, and we immediately go into her viewpoint when she comes out, and it's great. That chapter is so much fun because from her viewpoint, she's just like, I want meat. They smelled like meat, and she comes out and just absolutely butchers everybody looking for the good meat, as she puts it. And I liked it. I actually would like this whole little fight scene. I think is actually a very good example of threading character in through action and telling you something through the fight scene. I'd like to look at it in depth with Katie, actually, because I just think it's a good way of doing it. We've been looking for a good action scene to do for a while now. She eats everybody, and she eats, I think, the brother. And Jakob stands up, and you thought he was dead, and he's like, enough.
Viga does not eat the brother because what happened was that Jakob was fencing against the brother, a duel to the death, and the evil brother speared Jakob right through the heart, and in his dying moments, he was kind of like sinking towards this enemy, and then he does the whole, "Oops, by the way, I'm still alive," and then he kills him. And Viga kills everyone else. She just completely rips everyone to shreds.
I had thought that didn't happen the first time, because that is how Jakob will handle every single fight going forward. Is he starts the fight, it looks like he's gonna lose, he gets mortally wounded, the other guy thinks he's dead, and then he kills the guy because he's mortally wounded but not actually dead. This will happen 3 more times. Can you tell I'm a little annoyed? But yeah, Vigor kills everyone, and then when she turns back into a person from a wolf, she's like, I'm thirsty, and she has a temper tantrum, essentially, which I thought was a fun touch. It's like a good way to kind of puncture the whole like cool werewolf thing, is that actually she's kind of like a child.
I'm thirsty, and she throws up pieces of people and pieces of metal, and the transformation isn't so much that which we often see in horror movies, where, you know, the body kind of snaps and then the wolf comes out. The transition is pictured as something slightly more magical. So she kind of slowly sort of morphs back into human form and just throws up pieces of people and armor, and she immediately starts crying. She's like, "I'm thirsty. That was bad meat."
Yeah, again, it's a good moment. And the thing is, I think part of the problem I had is that I kept thinking Abercrombie was going to be trying to subvert these tropes to say something really pointed. And he's more like just having fun. Like, it's not so much a subversion as like he kind of wanted to write characters that were like a little bit not quite, but that were fairly archetypal, but like not quite the fantasy ideal, instead of subverting them for a very specific purpose, which is the impression I got from the Blade itself. Because even like Glokta in that book, who I fucking hated, like I could see that he was trying to say something with him about, you know, goodness and what the worth of people and how you change and things like that. Or again, Giselle.
The whole trilogy is essentially a subversion and a comment of the grizzled hero and what it means to be a hero.
Yeah, and he was very much trying to do that also with the barbarian character, Logan Ninefingers, I believe is his name, who like kind of doesn't want to fight anymore, but also doesn't have any other marketable skills, and so everybody keeps trying to get him to.
In the Blade itself, the original four people are all a version of someone who could be viewed as a hero, and the whole examination is looking kind of deeper, like what does it mean to be a hero in this kind of setting? What is the price you pay? And is our idea of heroism, is it actually, you know, kind of something awful? And so on. Anyway, back to this book. I do think you are right in what you're saying, but I think this is part of the problem where everything is a trilogy. Like, fantasy really has a huge problem that everything is a fucking trilogy, whether it needs to be or not, because I have full faith that Joe is going to do all of these things. It just didn't happen in this book.
It just didn't happen in the first 20 hours of the story. I mean, this is going to basically be my constant refrain, which is that, like, I agree. I think if this was like a standalone romp about half the time, I'd be like, okay, this is fun. He was just, you know, having fun in between his other big, super serious projects. It's okay for authors to just have fun so long as the readership is there for it. But I think that if I had gone in more with the view of like, oh, this is going to not be super serious or deep or try to say something, I think I would have enjoyed the book a little bit more, because going in being like, oh, okay, what subversion is he trying to say about the nature of humanity, like, didn't work. And you're just going to be kind of frustrated by it. And so, so the Var Wolf kills everybody. We figure out Jakob is immortal. Balthazar realizes he can't just break the binding on him very easily as he thought. There's this funny thing where every time he tries to think about doing it, he starts throwing up, because that's what the Savior said. And like, I thought that was very cute. It plays a little bit into Abercrombie's kind of love of like gross things, but in this case, I thought it was one of the comedic moments that really worked. And they find out that her uncle had broken his leg, so he can't take them to Troy anymore. He's like, you got to go on without me. I'll meet you there by ship. And Alex is a little bit like, oh, he kind of was feeling like my uncle, even though I'm a street urchin who doesn't feel like she belongs here. I'm a little sad about that. I don't know about going forward or not. The character stuff with Alex I thought was okay. I didn't think it was particularly good or bad. For me, she was just... like, I could have done with more of a dive into who she was.
It seemed a little odd that she had so much interest in wanting to believe this dude she has never met.
And the other thing is, like, I didn't connect to any of these characters, really. Like, I found them pleasant, but I never really cared what happened to them. They all just felt they never quite grew past that initial archetype to me. Even Alex, like, and so like after a while, I was like, okay, are you going to live? Are you going to die? Why am I here? Did you end up connecting to any of them, really?
No, I'll actually agree with you that they just don't, in this book, they don't outgrow their archetypes. They are just what we're presented with right away. And as we chip away on the 20 hours that is this book, slowly we get more and more kind of backstory. But it's not the kind of backstory that recontextualizes who they are. Mm-hmm. It is just something that builds more on what we kind of already knew.
There's one thing with Vhagar that'll come out that like I thought was really interesting and I wish had been earlier on. And then the book kind of seems to forget about it.
What?
And Vhagar is the stuff about how like she just actually wasn't a good person even before the wolf.
Yeah, people say she was a monster before the wolf, before the bite.
And see, I really liked that as a deconstruction because throughout the book, you're in her viewpoint a couple of times, and she like has memory problems. She can't remember anything. This is kind of one of the next things is they join a pilgrimage going off to the Holy Land, and they're kind of undercover. And she goes to get water with Alex, and you're in her viewpoint for the first time, and she cannot focus on anything. She gets really distracted all the time. She can't keep thoughts in her head, she also keeps talking about before the bite, because what happened is she got bitten, and then because she was basically like a Viking, and then like her tribe was like, okay, you're bad, we're going to tattoo you.
And Vhagar is really nostalgic about the times before the bite, like when she had her good life.
Mm-hmm, exactly, and her mother would braid her hair, and you get the sense throughout the book that like, oh, you know, she's violent, but she's fine. Like, you know, they talk about how she accidentally killed some of the other people in the band.
Yeah, in the beginning, it's very much that, oh, Vhagar is kind of, you know, kind of harmless. Like she tries to be good to her companions. She's not mean-spirited. She's a bit short-sighted sometimes, and she's a bit instinctual. Like she just acts. She's not good at thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have you have a very hard time piecing that together when people say that, oh, she was a monster before the bite, because it seems very much in the beginning like that all the bad things that happened are a direct result of her condition as a werewolf.
Do you think there's a demarcated, oh, okay, she's a good person, but then she goes into wolf mode and becomes very dangerous? And then there's this throwaway line or a couple paragraphs right towards the end of the book where she's like, oh, yeah, no, and before the bite, she remembered the screams of the nuns as they barred them in the church and it was set alight, and a couple of other just like absolutely horrific things she just did as a Viking.
Honestly, I think you kind of, if you were surprised at that point, you'd kind of slightly missed on the nuances. I think you kind of slept on her if you were surprised at that point when that thing was revealed, because Joe actually does something where he slowly more and more shows us how Vhagar is dodging responsibility and blaming the wolf for her own personal shortcomings. And how that is actually a rather bad characteristic. And if she can blame these horrible things she has done as a wolf on just being the wolf, when she actually has the capacity to control the wolf, like she can choose when to, you know, take a moment and calm down and stay in her human form. She is not completely a slave to the moon and turning into a werewolf. The more you realize that how much she's just excusing her own actions on, oh, the bite, everything was perfect before the bite. The more at least I started to understand how she could have been a terrible person before the bite, and how the bite is more like a symptom of a disease that was already there.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong. Joe definitely does thread that through. I think it's actually clever though that you do kind of excuse that in your head as like, oh, that's the kind of character Vikings are charming in their violence. We don't actually think about the horrible things they do. And then you go, oh shit, no, she just was like a bad person all the way through. And I wish there had been a little bit more impact, because that doesn't really go anywhere. And if it had been earlier in the novel, I think it would have helped. Like, she could have actually gone somewhere with that. I feel like he was almost trying to keep that as like a reveal, like the true extent of it till the end of the book. But we could have gotten that much earlier. She's such a stock archetypal character. That I think like that could have been moved forward. Because one of the big things we'll talk about is that I feel like none of the characters in this book really have much of an arc.
Honestly, big pistolas on that. I very much think it goes somewhere.
Okay. All right. We'll see. We'll get as we get there. But yeah, this one chapter, going back to it from Viger's perspective, I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's cool to get somebody else's perspective on this. Abercrombie, though, will do a thing where like characters act super weird in their perspective, and then you don't notice it in other people. So for example, Viger has this thing where like she'll keep re-saying things because she'll forget that she said it like 3 minutes before. And like in her chapter, Alex looks at her and is like, you just said that. Like, what? But then in nobody else's chapter does she do that. I feel like it would have been kind of cooler if that had been seeded earlier. And then you got that, oh no, she just can't remember things. That's why she keeps doing that. I thought it was a little bit of it could have been a little more cleverly done with how the information kind of works, because it's a little bit siloed, I felt like.
What you're talking about is the first character in her POV, and literally before that, the entire trip she had been locked in a wagon, so there was no a point at which he could have had an interaction to do that earlier. There were definitely points at which she could have done that more afterwards, though. She does have quite a lot of you get the sense that she is rather scatterbrained, maybe not to the extent that she is in her first point of view character, where she literally seems to struggle to keep a single thread of thought going.
I agree, but I also don't think he needed to have that chapter so early on. I think he could have had that chapter later, and it would have been kind of a fun thing to see that the way she's thinking is different. Like, oh, that's what's going on. Another example of this is Sunny, the elf who can go invisible. It's mentioned that a couple times that like she'll do things to help out before battle. So if there's like a Mexican standoff, she'll go and screw up how everybody's crossbows work. And so then when they fire them, it doesn't work. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, what happened? I thought it would have been kind of cool if like, and because she can talk with Jakob and give him like advice and stuff. And I thought it would have been kind of like interesting, or at least kind of like an examination of like the kind of holy warrior benighted by God, of like, oh, he seems to have all these miracles that work for him in battle, like all of a sudden the crossbows won't fire, or this person slips on something, or something like that. And then it ended up like, no, it's just an elf helping him sabotage everybody all the time. Like, I think that would have been like a fun subversion to have, but it's not really there. It's not that's not really what Abercrombie is doing, and I felt like that was a little bit of a missed opportunity to tie everybody in as a group.
He could have done something like that, but just imagine how long the book would have been then.
We could cut a lot of things to get to that length. No, I agree he's not like that now, but I think that would have been an interesting kind of even conflict for him, in that like the thing that people think makes him holy actually comes from the elves, the sworn enemy of Christendom. The next big thing that happens is, so they're with a pilgrimage now, going to the Holy Land, and they're like around other people and having to be chill, and Viger like wants to have sex with a bunch of people, and everybody's like, again? And this is just like a thing she does as a Swede, which from what I understand of Swedish people is very normal.
That is totally what Swedes do, and it's actually tying into how the Northern culture looked at sexual relations back in the day. Like, it was very, very different from the Catholic Church's marriage, and because the Vikings actually had this idea of virility being a kind of force of life. So it's kind of a show of strength that she wants to fuck everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny element of the book. And right from the beginning, we get that Diaz is like, oh, she's so gross but hot. Oh, that stupid, sexy werewolf kind of a feeling about it.
He's very bothered and very intimidated, and he thinks about how huge she is, and he thinks about the complete carnage she wreaked on that tavern. But at the same time, there is a little bit of a hint that, you know, he could be into that.
It's also like, oh, she won't put a shirt on. It's so gross, but she won't put a shirt on.
Yeah, he gets really upset because Vega kind of doesn't understand the point of clothes all the time. And he's like, could she just put some clothes on so I don't have to think about it? Because when I see these things, you know, certain things happen in my body and I'm a monk. And meanwhile, Balthazar and Baptiste are also having their kind of back and forth because they kind of clash, because Baptiste kind of likes riling him on, like she's like, oh, the great wizard, and he's like, magician, I'm a magician.
You know, it's funny because at first I thought a lot of the couples in the book, because there are three, are cute, and then after a while I was like, again, I kind of felt like this was going to be more grim, dark, and serious than it was, and it's a lot more just him having fun with his characters. Which is fine. It was a bit of a shift in how I had to think about the book. But the other main things that we find out are, Balthazar is talking with Rickard and is trying to be like, how do I break this binding? And Rickard's like, oh, I don't know. I've never really tried. Very lackadaisical. Balthazar is like, that guy's so annoying, but he might be useful. And he starts kind of coming up with a spell for it. And they go with the other thing to note is that Alexa and Sunny have a crush on each other. And this is shown like pretty early on. They like each other, and they have a lot of the like, oh, the other person is the only person who likes me kind of interactions.
Alex doesn't, she's grown up on the streets. She hasn't really inherited the intense hatred of elves that a lot of people have. And she's very, like, she's a lonely young girl. She kind of wants friends. And Sunny is sort of in a similar position where she has been treated worse than an animal her entire life. And now she just wants to be a person and kind of fit in with people. And is trying to do her best. So you see them talking and connecting, and immediately you get a sense that there's a liking there between them.
At first I thought it was cute. Again, none of these ships really like hooked me. I was like, these are pleasant, but I increasingly as they went on, I felt like the author did a little bit more than I do. And the big thing that happens with the pilgrimage is they're about to, the leader of the pilgrimage is a very holy woman whose name I forget. And she kind of takes Brother Diaz under her wing a little bit. And he's like, oh, cool, because he's a suck up. And towards the end of the trip, she's like, they're about to leave each other apart, and she's like, oh, this is a little awkward, but you need to give Alexa to us, or we're going to kill you all. And he's like, what? And she's like, Alexia. And he's like, what? And it ends up, she's like, yeah, look, you know.
We know who she is. We know what you're trying to do. But, the Pope being a 10-year-old girl is a joke, and it's an insult, and we're going to seize the princess now and, gonna stop this nonsense.
And Brother Diaz is like, this is the first time he's really affronted that somebody else is less religious than he is. And I thought that was kind of cool, cute. That was this is his first moment of real moral outrage. Though again, it's one of those things where the book, nobody in this book believes their religion particularly. Even they all seem extremely disillusioned with it from the first moment, which I just felt I don't know. I like books to say things and have themes, and this book doesn't really have those as much, besides kind of generic, kind of treat everybody good kind of themes, I felt like. And I felt like if this character especially had been actually a religious zealot a bit, that could have given a little bit more of a little bit more of a punch to why her betrayal happens. What do these people really think, and what drives and motivates them, and their religiosity. And so for me, it felt a little cheap that she was just a little bit ha, I'm the villain all along. I wasn't a good person. That's kind of how I felt about it a little bit.
I agree that the reveal wasn't a very good reveal, because the whole plot is like a travel montage, and then we run into the mini bosses and we have a fight, and then we resume the travel montage, and then we run into another mini boss. I do think there is a very clear theme with religion.
Sorry, guys, we're going to have to interrupt this right now. There is, for personal reasons, we will continue this in a moment, and you won't notice because we'll all try to wear the same clothes and be in the same lighting positions. All right, bye. Okay, guys, we're back. Through the magic of editing, you guys did not even notice that much time had passed. And I looked the same because I decided to wear the same shirt for continuity reasons, and Ellen forgot.
I did one of those, one of those impromptu wardrobe changes that. Have you ever seen like the gala shows where someone like rips their clothes off and they're wearing something else underneath? That's me. Yay.
Okay, all right, yeah, no. So same day, and I remember exactly where we were. We were talking about the pilgrimage that they were on, and it had been revealed that the very pious lady who they thought was a good person in charge of it is actually a bad person.
Yes, and Will had just said something incredibly inflammatory about this book lacking religious themes. And it was so controversial that we had the internet connection spontaneously combusted, and we are now back to rectify this.
I hear that you have a counter argument that you've been spending the equivalent of 2 days working on mentally, day and night. Would you like to posit that now or later?
You are such a backstabber. How can you stab me like this? You look me in the eye and then you go...
That's not a backstab. That's fundamentally not a backstab.
I don't know, whatever. You stab people, it's me.
You're facing me and stabbing me in the back. Yeah. Guys, this is her command of English, or maybe this is a weird Swedish custom.
You're throwing me under the bus. That's the technical term. You see the bus coming and you're like, okay, Lindbergh, they just go...
Backpedaling on her part.
I have been thinking about this for a while. You say there are no religious themes to this book, and I would like to pose a counter-argument.
I would like to qualify that to begin with. That I don't think there are any significant religious themes to them.
That is fair, but I also think that is not entirely...
Posit your counter-response, and then we'll go through it.
I would make an argument that this is the agnostics book, because all of the characters essentially start this journey through this first book, believing less than they believe towards the end. And I think, how do we know? How can we believe in something that we never see any proof of? What is religion, really? Is it an inherent piece of religion that you are asked to believe in something that you will never see any kind of proof of at all? And as modern intelligent people, it seems like asking a lot, to be honest, for most of us, which is why, for example, my country, Sweden, is almost entirely secular. This is reflected in the way the book is told. Like, we enter the book with this modern-day humans' apprehension and questions, and in the beginning the answer just seems to be, believe. And the further we go along in the book, the more our characters interact, the more they start to question their own beliefs. And I do think... Oh, listen, it's hard to make this argument. It is not it's clearly not an overtly religious book, but I do think that the author is trying to examine religion through the eyes of his characters. And that is why so many of them are skeptics. And that is also why, towards the end, we have seen things that rational people have been unable to explain through their rational train of thought. And what they fall back on then is that perhaps they were wrong. Perhaps there is something higher.
I would argue that I don't think that is... Excuse me. That doesn't, I think, come through in the characters and their growth throughout or non-growth throughout the story. I think that it's also something where that's not really... Again, I don't think that's really in the character's arc. You could kind of make the argument that it's in Balthazar's and a little bit in DS's, but Vager's religious arc is like incredibly more of a joke than anything else. Balthazar's is more or less like not even a faith thing. It's a
Vigor is Norse. We don't believe in your silly gods down south there.
remember, but she does that thing towards the end where she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get baptized," and then it's like,
Yeah, but
like
she
a joke.
does that the way Swedish people nowadays get baptized. That's a kind of fun thing. And today people like to get baptized, so they'll get gifts.
But actually, that's kind of my point too, is that there's not really a religious component to her story.
I do think it's more of the author's examination. It's not as much of all the characters having a serious religious arc. It's more of an author examination on how we today view religion. So the baptizement of the heathen is kind of snuck in there for the same kind of reason that kids today be like, oh yes, I want to be baptized. And in high school, there's another thing you can go through that is like a religious education that goes on for 6 weeks. And at the end, you get a diploma, but why everyone does it is because you usually get a present as well, and everyone likes gifts. And that's very similar to how Vigor interacts with it. She's like, oh, I think it would be fun to get baptized. And then when she actually realizes what it means, she's like, oh, God, when will it end? This is so boring.
I think there could be really interesting themes introduced through each of the characters representing a different way of engaging with belief. So like Balthazar, Ivan Draxi, will throughout the book he'll come to believe that, oh wait, the new pope is the new savior, like she really is woman Jesus, but then he kind of treats it very like it's not really a spiritual thing for him, it's a factual realigning of powers where he's like, oh, maybe it would be good to be on Jesus's side. And like, I think that could be an interesting commentary, but it's not really his goal, and it's not contrasted. Jakob has the same relationship with faith that he did at the beginning. Alexa also has the same one.
I think you've hit the nail on the head already. It's not the author's goal. Like, the only reason to why you're criticizing this for not being overtly religious enough is that it's vaguely medieval and vaguely real worldish. Like, you don't pick up Strange Dark Shore and say that I wish it was more overtly religious.
Right, but this is about a religious conflict with characters who are under the power of the church, and one of the major elements is that
mostly about the church as a organizational body.
I wouldn't even go that far, because it's really more of an action adventure with just it's like the Dirty Dozen, but with like the vague idea that the church is involved. And I think that would have been okay, but also that kind of goes back to prove my point that this isn't really a book about religion.
No, it's not a book that even tries to examine religion on any deeper level.
I think that was my original claim.
No,
I can't remember, because it might have been 2 days ago, but
I think you said that as if it's a criticism. Like, this book isn't even trying to examine religion.
Oh, I think what I said is that it's okay if it isn't, if it had other things to say, but because it doesn't really have a ton of other things, other themes to talk about, that feels like the one that's most lacking, or the one that could be there. Like to fill out whatever thing he's trying to say. And I mean, it is a little odd that in a book that again is like, we're going to go fix a religious schism. We're all under power of the Pope. One of our characters is a monk. One of our characters works for the church. And like, there's actual girl Jesus.
One of our characters is a heathen.
One of our characters is a heathen. Elves are going to the holy... Like, it feels a little weird that it doesn't engage more with religion than it does.
Okay, I will give you that. Yes.
Right, so the way they defeat the woman they thought was good and is actually bad is actually kind of fun, because you think it's revving up for a fight, and then Rickard, the vampire, is like, he gets in front of everybody, and he's been drinking pilgrim blood, so he looks very young, and he starts pontificating about his wife and the dumplings that she used to make or have, and everybody is just completely enraptured, and you as the reader get like, this is a vampire power he's using, and it's very funny the way that it's written, because it's written from DS's point of view, and he's like, nothing mattered. He was just thinking of the dumplings, and like, why were they trying to shoo him off? Did they not understand how important this was? And I liked it. I thought it was a funny inversion and a way of getting out of this situation.
Yeah. The scene describes a vampire throwing a glamour, and the scene is seen through one of the people getting glamoured, and it's very convincingly and very cleverly put. which makes it more effective than if we just saw everyone else starting to behave weird, because for some reason Baron Rickard's glamour would not affect the point of view character, but he actually is very affected, and it's kind of fun to see that it's definitely a style, and it's a style that, for example, Jeff Vandermeer is very good at writing, where he has logical narrative streaming through the character's conscious mind, and then little by little it just becomes more and more unmoored until the banal seems perfectly logical. And that is similar to what happens here, because at first Brother Diaz is curious, like what is Rickard saying about his home city and this shop that's there. And the longer you as a listener listen into this scene, because this is the first time we see this particular power, the more you listen into the scene, you're like, okay, what? These they make these dumplings here, and everyone's like, what? The dumplings. And at that point, as a reader, you're like, oh, okay, I see. I see what's going on.
I liked it. I thought it was well done. And again, I think it's like a fun subversion. You didn't expect it coming. It's also a way to avoid a long fight scene. The problem is that, like I said earlier, this will be how Rickard handles the next 3 fights in a row. Like this never gets subverted. There's a rule of like of 3s where something happens, and then the 3rd time it happens, it subverts what you think is going to happen. So there's never a point where someone's like, "Oh, that old vampire trick," and then Rickard has to change his game up. Like this will happen next time, and the next time he will successfully glamour people.
Well, actually, the 3rd time he ends up in a fight. I won't say it's the 3rd time he glamours people. I can't remember how many times he glamours people.
I think it's
but during the last big battle, when you do expect him to pull out these dumpling tricks on this human character, and for some reason this vampire, this monster hunter is going to be immune. Actually, he pulls out another power out of the hat. Remember?
Turns into bats, doesn't he?
That is a kind of subversion. I'm not saying it's great, but I'm saying it's there.
I was thinking of when he faces the 3 handmaidens and he's able to glamour one and then runs out of juice for the next 2.
I do agree with Will that there's just way too many fights in this book that end up progressing about the same as that first fight in the inn.
I wish that had been better. I think that's an element that makes the fight scenes kind of weak and kind of like, okay, we already let's get it along.
He glamours them, and as a final kind of fuck you, like he glamours everyone in the pilgrimage, all the pilgrims and all the bystanders and going alongers and all the hookers following the pilgrimage in order to, hawk their wares. He tells everyone to forget that they have been here, the group of devils and Alexia, except you, Mother, who I can't remember the name of. You will have, for the rest of your trip, you will have a terrible, is it a rash or something?
I think it's a rash, yeah.
It's so funny, because we see a bit of a blimp of her later, and she's talking about this terrible rash she can't seem to get rid of. Anyway, everyone forgets they were there.
Okay, I actually did remember what I was going to say. Hold on. Because as much as I did think this was kind of like funny and a good subversion, there was a moment while I was gearing up that it was kind of interesting, because these pilgrims are very religious, and they're building up to a mob because this woman is telling them the true things. Like, this woman is a werewolf, that man is a vampire, this person's an apostate. And there was a moment where it was like, oh, they're going to have to fight people who aren't bad. And like, that's actually kind of interesting. They're going to have to kill people who aren't unpersons in the way that bad guys are in books. And so I kind of would have liked to see that play out. Maybe not in this scene, but at some point in the book. That would have been an interesting commentary on like faith a little bit, but also just morally more tricky.
I think also once again we are back to that this book just isn't grimdark enough for you. You would like it darker, more gritty, more conflicting.
I think this book is very like people on an adventure, which is like,
it's a lot more lighthearted than his other trilogies and his standalones.
Yeah, I feel like he was just having like a good time, pretty much. And like, that's fine. But as I said, I'm going to just keep saying it's a bit long
This
for
is
that.
hitting, now that I think of it, this is hitting closer to Terry Pratchett. That
It's
book
not
you
as overtly
thought-
satirical.
The book you thought was... It is
Guards.
kind of satirical, actually. It is very satirical. It's making satire of people in the church. The church is a huge organizational body with a lot of influence, a lot of riches, using it for their own benefits. That's a huge discussion in England. He's making fun of the Swedes and the Danes. Like, a lot of the things in here is disguised satire, and it's also making satire of the regular fantasy tropes of, the secret princess and all that, and the elves always being good and naturey.
It's not really a satire of that, though, and it's not even really much of a commentary on that. I think in terms of tone, they both have that British like snarkiness, but I wouldn't really go so far as to say it's a satire, or even that there's a particular subversion of like the running of the church and how it works.
Why not?
Because those elements aren't there.
No, what is lacking for satire? What is satire, Will?
Here. Oh no, your signal's breaking up while I look it up.
In satire, you take real elements, real world commentary, and you turn it up to max in order to make a point.
Well, what I would say is that it's the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues. So for example, if I were to have to use it in a sentence, I would say the crude satire seems to be directed at the fashionable protest singers of the time. That's, if I just had to, off the top of my head, come up with
You totally read that somewhere. But also, satire is often more used in order to criticize systems and societies and cultures, like the broader spectrum, not significantly just this person or that person. Well, sometimes if they're a very famous person, like Donald Trump, for example.
Exaggeration is kind of an important part of that, and none of these are particularly exaggerated systems.
What in this book is not exaggeration? Every church person is so ridiculously corrupt.
I would not agree with that characterization, but if you compare it to something like Guards, where it's like the exaggeration there is quite noticeable. Like the city
I'm not
is
saying that it's exactly like Terry Pratchett. I was saying that it's more akin to Terry Pratchett than George R.R. Martin.
I don't even necessarily know that I would agree with that. I mean, you say that the church is like everyone is mustache twirling, but they're not actually mustache twirling. The book makes an attempt to, for example, Basilica, the main abbess who sent them on this mission, they try to make her kind of a little bit more understandable by the end.
It's not Basilica.
I didn't think it was, but I thought I might be able to sneak it.
Cardinal Gishka.
Close. And she, like, at the end, it makes a point to kind of talk through her motivations of, like, I kind of have to be hard on these people because they're kind of not good people. I have to work in the shadows. She's a pretty grounded character. Even the workings of the church.
She is very purpose-driven, which is also a lot of the church's history that they would not like to talk about.
But it's not an exaggeration, really, of it.
Fine, whatever. I don't care anymore.
Okay, so they get on a boat to go to Troy. And while they're on this boat...
Before we even get to the boat, they go to a harbor city and they're introduced to...
Oh, right. There's a side quest. They go to some kind of like master of thieves, head honcho person. And he's like, I can get you on a ship to Troy, but first you got to go do a side mission for me and get some loot. And so they go, and it's like a house that's been like buttoned up by a sorcerer. So Balthazar has to like come up with spell ways to get it undone. And like while he's doing that, he's secretly like, hey, this is perfect. I'm going to get the things I need to undo the Pope's bindings. And there's a very funny thing where he necromances two twins' heads so they can use them as walkie-talkies. So one group that's doing the heist can talk to the other over distance, but only through the person's head. And the person says everything everyone in the room is saying, so it becomes hard to figure out who's talking. It's very funny. I liked that part. And basically, he ends up failing at breaking the binding. And he's like, tarnation, that sucks. He ends up like vomiting everywhere. Then they get on the boat. And when he's on the boat, Baptiste is like, oh, you did well. And like, I actually think that's kind of cool.
You skipped what happened in the House of Illusions. Everyone runs into an illusion they can't escape from, and Balthazar could easily break this illusion, but he doesn't do it because he's trying to break free on his end. And I thought it was really interesting that in the illusion, when it's finally broken, we find Jakob and Viga killing each other, but because of how the illusion presented itself, they were both currently trying to kill a past version of themselves.
Oh yeah, that was kind of interesting imagery, and we learn, I think, a little bit more about Jakob and like his crusading past and like some of the bros he used to have back then.
You get a glimpse back into one of the holy wars where it's remembered as glorious and, last standing and all that stuff that people tend to remember after the fact if they were not present. Whereas Jakob remembers the actual charge and how terrible and how dark everything seemed, and also how he was put in this situation where he made terrible decisions because he was chasing glory. Instead of sending his boys home so they could live on and have happy lives, he sent them in to die. And he knew it was going to happen. And Viga, she goes back and remembers the time they put to shore and did their pillaging that Vikings do, Vikings. They did their pillaging, and then they had to go into the woods to find a new mast for their ship, for the longboat. And she remembers the last conversation she had with one of her friends. And I do think that one of the big reoccurring themes in all of these, except for Balthazar and Baptiste, because they both love themselves, but especially Viga and Jakob have this character arc where they are very they would like to believe that they are not the person they used to be, and they want to separate themselves from the person they used to be. But in this book, they are also more or less just stuck in the same situations, repeating the old habits and the old behaviors that lent them to becoming who they are today. And I think this scene in the House of the Illusionists is the first little whiff we get of that, because we see a little bit of their past and then we see their reaction to it. And the reaction is that they try to kill the past version of themselves because they don't want to acknowledge them anymore.
I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but we can talk about it more towards the end. I think this scene would have hit harder for me if it weren't for the fact that, like, Viger and Jakob both tend to have a ton of flashbacks even in their normal narrative. So this didn't really feel like too much of a break from that, like in terms of impact. But I also don't think this is like a bad interlude. I think it's like, it's a little formulaic, but I think it serves well and it's kind of fun. And also, it doesn't really outstay its welcome, which is nice. Like, they're there, they're doing the thing, and then they move on. And there's impact on the plot because Balthazar failed at breaking this, charm.
And they got the item out of the House of Illusion.
Then they get on the boat, finally. And again, Baptiste goes up to him while he's like, oh, I failed in the hold. And she's like, but it was cool you tried. And he's like, oh, she's super attractive. But how could I, Balthazar von Gelt?
Sham Ivan Draxi.
He is like... And like, I thought this part was cute. Like, none of the relationships did I feel very strongly about, but I did think they were cute at times. It's funny because I kind of knew something was going to happen to her because, like, she's only one of two devils that doesn't have a point of view. So you're kind of like, and she also is kind of the odd one out. There's nothing supernatural about her. She's just kind of there.
She's a pirate every woman type of character. Well, I kind of, because if Joe has this thing where in the past he has used a lot of normal people characters who get by on wit and not sticking their neck out. So obviously there was going to be some theme to that, with her commenting on how she shouldn't stick her neck out. But I feel like this is definitely one of those little breadcrumbs left for Joe Abercrombie fans. It was just a fun connection to make.
I thought she was a good character. I liked that she was female and yet also sort of like a kind of scoundrel character who's not very like sexualized at all. I mean, like Balthazar has like a crush on her, but it's not like, you know, she was a prostitute in her previous workings or something like that, you know, high fantasy, or not high fantasy, but fantasy sometimes tends to...
Yeah, and it's not because she's so incredibly beautiful and her bosom is so incredibly swelling and she's always somehow ends up naked.
Exactly. Like, it's just, she's very like, this is a character you would kind of expect to be male, but she's female, and it's like, I did like that aspect of it. I mean, in general, I think, and you can probably speak to this more as a woman, and I also obviously want to give you a platform to speak openly about this. But I thought the representation in this book was pretty good, and it's pretty clever that Jesus was female, so the church has more women, and women have more, like, status in society.
I think Joe is really good with his women. Like, he always treats people like characters. It doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman. And I really appreciate him for that.
I thought it was pretty well done throughout the book. Okay, they're on the ship and they're sailing, and then we get Mini Boss 2. So, or actually just Boss 2, I guess. The second of the, oh man, I already forgot.
Cousins.
The second of the cousins shows up, and he has fish people at his command. One thing we didn't mention back at the beginning when they were fighting the animal people in the inn is that these animal people are remarkably boring for being half human, half animal hybrids. Like, there's no real like atmosphere. You don't get a sense for them being like maddened creatures or suffering or even anything particularly gross about them. They're just like there and then not.
Have you played MMORPG?
I have.
What do you call the groups of little trash
mobs? Yeah.
They're the mobs. They are just there to provide some kind of action-y fighting. Like they are, and this is so interesting because they are the result of human experiments combining humans and animals in order to try and ascertain where the seat of the soul is, which harkens back to real experiments people did trying to find out where in the body the soul would live and trying to prove that there is such a thing as a soul. And this is rather horrific, isn't it? Like, you know, you can only imagine, because in order to do this, you would use live tissues, I assume. So how this was achieved was probably, you know, rather horrific. And all they actually do is show up to get butchered rather quickly and nondescriptly.
They have as much gravitas as a trash mob. And that's the thing, is I think that's a real, it's not that he had to, but I feel like it's a missed opportunity, as you say, for me, for the book to be more grimdark in terms of horror, or even just kind of examining what it means. If we were going to go the religious themes route of what the soul is, where does that reside? Do animals have one or not? I really thought Vager was going to be one of them, because in one of the covers for this book, there's a giant wolf on the front. So I was like, oh, the person in the cage is definitely a werewolf. And like when she first showed up, I thought that's what it was going to be, because I thought that would be like a really interesting examination of like a way to get that viewpoint of the animal human hybrid. And that's obviously not what he wanted to do, but I do feel like that was just like missing a little bit. More of an examination, or even just trying to make them creepier. We're going to get to like a grotesque abomination of them, Hell Pit abomination style, if you know your Warhammer lore, and it's remarkably just kind of treated for laughs, even though it's supposed, like, it keeps telling you it's a super gross thing, but it doesn't feel gross. I don't know, has Abercrombie ever done more of like a horror vibes thing in his work?
I think no, not overtly so, but the eaters from the Blade itself are a lot more horror inspired than this whole book. Actually felt a lot more lighthearted, sort of a almost YA version
without all the cursing. Yeah. Like if you took out the cursing, then like I could see that. Yeah,
I would probably have liked it if what they were fighting were actually people who were hired by the cousin. Or maybe they weren't even hired. Maybe they had been, sort of lobotomized and mind controlled into working for the cousin. So that there becomes kind of, because they're human monster hybrid things that are not even vaguely human, we can kind of just kill them off, blah, 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 blah. And no one needs to feel bad about it. No one needs to think about it. No one needs to feel that what does this make me if I do this, if I kill these people? Like, there is no empathy towards them at all. They are just things to get butchered in order to have an encounter so the plot can move on. And I would actually have liked it to be some kind of examination in itself beyond just, oh, here's a fight.
They're unpersoned, so they don't have to feel guilty killing them. I was recently watching clips from Andor, which is a TV series about Star Wars. Yes, I'll watch the whole series at some point, guys, but this is how it happens. I watch clips and then I actually watch the thing. There is a character in there called KS2, who is a battle droid who got reprogrammed from the Empire to work for the Rebellion. He originally made his appearance in Rogue One, where he's like a funny character who kind of kills some stormtroopers in funny ways. And it's that's great. It's fun. But in Andor, there's a part where the main character, Andor, is being pinned down by a squad of stormtroopers, but they're not stormtroopers per se, because they don't have the helmets on. And you spend 3 minutes with them trying to figure out how they're going to get into the house. And there's a little bit of characterization going on about who they are. And so then when KS2 shows up to save the day, it's horrific. You get a sense of oh, this is an inhuman killing machine, as much as he is just been reprogrammed. It's not funny. It's really terrifying to have this monster that cannot be shot coming at you. And I think that kind of feeling a little bit of the terror that these animal people feel as for example, Vader just rips through all of them. I think that would have just added some to the book. I think that would have made it a little more grimdark, but I think just added a little bit more depth. It would have just been an element I liked. And here it's just kind of instead of something.
The book is kind of presented to you as an extended character study. Here's your group of characters and now we're going to study them. But I also feel like we never actually get to the part where we do study them.
That's such a good way of putting it. It is presented like it's going to be a character study, how we're going to have multiple characters reflecting on one theme, and then it's kind of this is just the prologue to the actual story. This almost feels like in book 2 they're going to get their development, and we're just spending all of book 1 setting up who they are.
I would agree. This whole book actually does feel like a prologue, because there's a lot of talk about why this schism in the church needs to be consolidated, because the elves will be returning. The elves are coming sometime. No one knows when. But when it happens, the church needs to be united against them. And then this entire book is just getting Alexia to the throne so that this can even start to happen. This schism can even start to be healed. So in a sense, this whole book is like an appetizer.
And I think that's the thing is it's okay to have archetypal characters, and that's fun, but we don't need a book of introduction to them because we kind of already immediately grok who they are. And I think that's probably, it's funny because even just in theoretically 2 days passing since we recorded, I think I'll remember this book a little fondly, even if I didn't enjoy parts of it, because it was too long, because on the whole, it was kind of fun. You know what I mean? And it was kind of
It's pleasant. It's a fun read. He's a good author. The scene he gives you it's a palatable scene most of the time. It is merely the fact that this book was so long and went not really that far that makes the overall impression to be... Yeah.
I think also if I had read this over a month versus a week, I also might have forgotten details a little bit, so I would have been okay with them being repeated a little bit more than I was. Because the thing is, I remember the first fight scene. I don't need to be reminded that Yakov misses his buddies or thinks he did something wrong in the past. And that's kind of just one of these things where reading experiences really can kind of change what you think of the book. at least initially.
This is interesting too, because this is the start of a third trilogy of Joe Abercrombie that I will be reading. And in each of his previous trilogies, book number 2 has been my favorite. Because the book number 2 has always been the book where the setup that happened in the first book begins to give payback, emotional payback. The characters actually begin to go somewhere with these base set of premises that are being set up in the first book.
I actually would be interested in reading the sequel with you when it comes out. Because if it's good, that's cool. And if it isn't, I can complain more and we can verbally spar in the way that people find so witty, but you and I find so simple and pedestrian.
I think we should read Before They're Hanged instead, because that is military fantasy and that's much more your thing.
I want to read The Heroes. You said that's quite good.
Yeah, The Heroes is the best one. I think the tone didn't work for you in this book.
The tone, and also I just wasn't fond of any of the characters. Like, I was kind of fond of Giselle in The Blade itself. Like, I kind of wanted to see what happened to him. I thought he was kind of like a different character. He had like funny reactions to things while at the same time being kind of an asshole and charming.
Yeah, I do think in making the cast a bit too big, he couldn't give us the time to find that one character that we really get sucked into and really connect with. Instead, we got more of a medley of all these characters, like this big group of characters, and here's a little bit about them. And in the end, I didn't either feel particularly invested in any of their conceits and backstories and future. Perhaps, possibly with the exception of Vigga, because I think she goes somewhere very interesting towards the end.
Yeah, I think at the end there's an interesting, like, oh, okay, this could lead to something kind of really interesting.
It could. But it's also something that didn't happen in this book, so who knows?
Yeah, we're also, I realized, having the end of book discussion halfway through the plot. So let's keep pushing forward a little bit. They have the fight with the cousin and the fish people. Jakob kills them the same way he did the last one, by dying and then coming back. There's a lot of shenanigans and the ship gets broken. And they get shipwrecked.
The ship sinks, partly because Vigga goes wolfy and attacks the boat. And Brother Diaz is trying to stop her, and he tries to do the Jakob thing where he's like, Vigga, this behavior is entirely unacceptable. And the werewolf, in its werewolf form, just turns around and just looks at him like, what did you say? And he's like, and it came to him that he had quite possibly made a mistake just now.
I liked the double inversion of the gender trope of like the soft female who can make the Hulk come out of his Hulk state, in that, like, you know, the Hulk is a woman in this case and Diaz is a man, but then also the inversion that it doesn't work. Like, there's two levels to it that I thought were fun.
Yeah, Vigga and Brother Diaz were, if we're talking about pairings, they were my favorite pairing, because they just had an interesting dynamic and a fun inversion of gender roles and expectations and tropes. But anyway, Vigga sinks the boat and they all get split up getting to shore.
And then we get a section where they're getting like chased by people, and there's like different groupings of characters.
Yeah, they're being pursued by a group of mercenaries employed by the third cousin. And this group of mercenaries, they have a werewolf with them who's using the werewolf senses to track them. So the group have split into 3 separate parts, and all of these separate parts need to avoid the group of mercenaries and the werewolf, but they also need to try to find their way back to each other and reconnect. So Alex gets pulled off the boat and to land by Sunny, and they end up in a situation where the mercenaries are going to find them. So they basically just think that, oh, what should we do? How can we possibly get away from them? And it's like, oh, do you see this town over there? And Sunny's like, the burning town that's been sacked. And, you know, there's piles of corpses everywhere. And she's like, yeah. Is there any other way we could, you know, disappear into place without going there? It's like, no, I probably don't think so. You should probably go to that burning, horrible town where everyone's dying. So they do. And let's see, what does Viga and Brother Diaz end up in the wilderness together?
And they, he kind of like helps push her forward, which I liked. Again, I think their relationship, and not even their relationship, but the dynamic between them, it has a lot of kind of interesting energy there. The priest and the heathen, you know, he is trying to keep his faith, but at the same time, she's really hot in a gross way that he doesn't know what to do with. And they end up sleeping together at this point. And like, I thought that was funny. And it was, I mean, I don't know if I said this in the first half, but like, I really think this should just be from Brother Diaz's point of view. Like, I feel like this book would be so strong if it was just Diaz. And that was like, we just got the other characters from his viewpoint. And it's this poor beleaguered monk trying to deal with these crazy people and hot werewolf lady.
I could have bought Brother Diaz and Alex. And Alex's point of view, instead of doing the subversion where it's kept from the reader who she is, instead her point of view would be a lot more about how hard it is for her to pretend to be someone she isn't in front of other people.
I could also maybe buy Balthazar, mostly because I think he's Abercrombie's favorite character and he's the one who goes through most of an arc, I felt like. But I think Alex and Diaz are like the two viewpoint characters, because there's a thing where sometimes characters pop more when they're viewed from someone else's point of view than when they're from their own point of view. I remember we talked about those in the Locked Tomb books. I also would have liked if these pairings had been a little bit more unexpected, if they had paired characters together that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of, like Sunny and Balthazar, or like Jakob. And
knowing Abercrombie, there is absolutely no way that they're going to end up where they started. But I do take your point. Like, it was set up very early that these are going to be the pairings. And then that kind of worked through in all cases but one.
Well, but I mean, I don't even mean like romantic pairings. I mean, literally just like, it would have been kind of interesting to see in this moment when they're split up into different groups, different dynamics, if two characters had to work together that you didn't really think of as having one, because I kind of think that would have helped the group dynamic a little bit.
And instead they got split up in their little pairings that were going to become, you know.
Well, and like thematically, like what does Baptiste and Varg, I keep getting her name wrong.
Yeah, or Baptiste and Alex. I would have liked to see that, because
that would have been a good
Baptiste one. She's so competent and like she has done everything at least once, and she knows all these weird things and all these weird people. And it would just be, I felt at times that there were moments where Alex were kind of, you know, impressed by Baptiste. And it would have been fun to just see them try to, you know, use their resources to survive together.
Or even Jakob and Sunny, I think would have been really cool, because there's a certain amount of implied he's okay with her being an elf and maybe a little bit of a fatherliness to him. But that would have been interesting to explore, if he is or he isn't, or how does she see him.
Yeah, and it would also have been an opportunity to delve more into Jakob's past with the elves, because out of all these people, Jakob is the only one who has had personal experience of fighting elves and has been to these places where the elves ate people and left entire cities just empty. So he of all should be more antagonistic towards elves than anyone, but instead we see him kind of, you know, being a somewhat fatherly figure to Sunny.
Yeah, I agree. And so like, I think those would have been cool, and maybe we'll get them more in the second book. I think that would be interesting.
But yeah, okay, so Brother Diaz and Viga are split up, and Viga at times, she's like a bit dispirited. She thinks she did badly on the boat, and he's like, no, but you have to keep going, and you know, you saved my life, that's something. And she's like, yeah, sure. And she kind of feeds him, and he's deeply disturbed and deeply impressed by her. And eventually they end up approaching the same city that Alex and Sunny has gone to without knowing it. And Baron Ricard, together with Balthazar
Baptiste.
Let's see. Well, Baptiste and Balthazar end up together, just striving on when they get arrested and put into prisons. And this lady shows up and being like, did I invite you to come to my lands? And Balthazar is just, you know, trying to suck up, because when it comes down to it, he just has no spine. Like, he is one of the three greatest necromancers in Europe. And then when it comes down to it, he's just a lick spittle.
I think he has a love of pretension and of being of status. I don't think he's as much as a lick spittle. By the end, I think we get a little bit more. I don't know why I'm trying to defend him.
Well, he has a bit of growth.
Yeah, and I think he has just a love of finer things in life a little bit.
He does, and he's also acutely aware whenever he's outranked. So, because at first he tried to be really respectful of Baron Rickard, because Baron Rickard is a baron, and one of the jokes in the book is that no one really understands the intricacies of Europe's aristocracy, like the barons and the lords, and it's impossible to know really what's what. But he had a creeping feeling that the baron would probably be above him, and then the baron turns out to be a vampire, and he's like, ugh, vampires. So, and now that this countess shows up, he's like, oh, madam, oh, we were definitely not intending to trespass, and we are certainly not spies. And she's like, that's exactly what a spy would say, isn't it? And he's like, well, what? And she's like, someone said did you say he wasn't a magician? And this entire book, Balthazar's one thing has been about getting people to call him a magician, not a wizard. And now, finally, when someone gets it right, he's like, no, a magician, someone of that grand status and knowledge and education, I could not possibly.
It's a good scene. And then what's really funny about it is the rich lady comes up and sees Baptiste, and like she's like, oh, Baptiste, and they were like handmaids together, and it's fun to see him get upstaged by the lady he didn't think had any status. And so like they're like, yeah, she's like, yeah, I'm going to war with this other duke. It's going to be tough. Do you want to come with me? And it's like, he's like, okay.
Yeah, and this fucking asshole duke, this turd liquor duke, this goat's anus, she calls him, who's just my lands and my rights. And so I've gone to war with him, or possibly he has gone to war with me. I can't really remember. But say, would you like to come along? And they're like, yeah, sure. Let's come along.
Well, I think one of the things is that they're trying to find these druid stones so that he can cast a spell to find Alex. And so that's also one of the things they're trying to do.
Yeah, and she's like, oh, if you help me out with my thing, I'll help you out with your thing afterwards. So they're like, oh yeah, sure, let's do it. And meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Jakob and...
maybe it's Rickard.
It's Baron Rickard, yeah. Jakob and Baron Rickard. Jakob wakes up on a corpse cart because he's like being rattled and smothered by dead bodies and this awful stench, and he's like, oh fuck, it's happened again. And he's like, I'm dead of a corpse cart. And he gets up, and the people who ran the corpse cart, they're like, what? This one got up. Jesus, Dad, is that normal? I could have sworn he was dead.
It's very Bring Out Your Dead, if you guys know the reference.
Yeah, Bring Out Your Dead. It was funny. I don't exactly remember just how, but Baron Rickard sort of finds him, and he talks this duke into Jakob being this military mastermind. He absolutely has to have him as his commander, otherwise this war could go any which way.
At that point, he's like, okay, I'll work for you because at least I'll get there. And the Baron and the lady like face off across the field, and Jakob is like, look, dude, this battle is not going to go well for you. You should go and try to do diplomacy. And he's like, Jakob, you're right. When you're right, you're right. You know, you remind me of another great crusader from 200 years ago. And Jakob's like, I can't lie, but yeah, I do probably remind you of that guy. And this is when, you know, the Duke and the lady, they meet and they're glaring daggers at each other. And this is when it's revealed that they're husband and wife. And that this is like not a marital squabble exactly, but kind of a marital squabble that's taken on political aspects.
It's very much, they're very passionate.
Yes, that's the thing that comes out, is that like this is their form of foreplay, essentially, is going to war. And so they meet Baptiste, who's on the other side, and Balthazar, and they go towards the stones. This is one of those things where, like, I found this funny and I found it charming, the Baron and his wife, but it was one of these things where I'm like, I'm not quite sure if it was worth taking the time to do this in terms of like what does it add to the message of the novel.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like, oh, now they get split up. And because they have been split up, we kind of have to see what they all get up to before they reunite. It's a little like that.
Yeah, I think it's also the thing with the novel is that there are some stories that are kind of episodic in terms of I felt like Between Two Fires was like that, in that it's very clearly like several stories or events grouped one after the other, whereas this one felt like it was trying to be like a more cohesive novel with like the brothers coming at them and trying to kill them, but then you have these two like side quests of like the magician's house and then this one, and I think there's like one more, and so it kind of screwed my expectations, I think, a little bit, and a little bit of like, why are we doing this? This is already quite a long novel. Because the big character beat that we get from this is Balthazar gets to the stones and he summons a demon because he's just like, fuck it, I do not want to be under the control of this Pope anymore.
To be more precise, he summons the Duke of Hell.
Right, who is like Bathsheba or something. And he doesn't even like summon and bind her, he just summons her. And she like is terrifying and nobody can stand up to look to her. And she's like, you would have to give me your whole soul for me to break this binding. And he's like, fuck it, at least it'll be my choice. And everyone's like, this is a terrible idea. So she goes up and she looks at the markings and she like is very sheepishly like, oh wait, no, I can't do that. This is from the actual God. I can't handle it. Okay, bye. And he's like, what? Like, you're a demon. You can't, that's not right. You're supposed to be able to do anything. And she's like, I can, but not this.
Yeah, there are rules to these things, If I start doing these, then everything is just going to collapse. Sorry, bro, I can't help you with that. Would you like some riches instead? And he's like, no, I want to be free of this binding. And she's like, well, can't help you. Sorry, bye.
I thought it was pretty funny, though. Again, it's one of the ways the novel is not grim dark, and I hope he doesn't try to make demons like a real scary force in the future, because this is not like, I'm okay with it as like a funny thing that happened, but like if he then tries to go back and make them scary, I don't think that would work very well.
I don't think he's going to do that. I think it's kind of a fun joke that the dark necromancer who consorts with demons gets kind of snubbed by these demons.
Well, and the demon is just sheepish about it. She's not even like super mad. She's more just embarrassed that she can't.
Yeah, before that, she's super superior. She's like, I like it when you grovel so.
Yeah, it's great. This is when it's revealed that like that Pope girl is actually the second coming of Jesus. Woman Jesus, and Balthazar is like kind of really shocked by it.
Well, it's not said expressly, but Balthazar clearly has to start figuring out whether it could be possible that she is who she says she is, because what kind of binding can the Duke of Hell not undo?
And so then back over with Brother Diaz and Varg, Vigar. I don't know why I have so much trouble with that. They have sex, and it's kind of funny because he's very ashamed of it. And then they face off against the cousins mercenaries that were
a few of the henchmen employed by the cousin managed to track down Alex and Sunny. And just about as they are about to drag them off to meet with their leader, Viga finds them instead, and she butchers these three people, and they reunite with Brother Diaz. And together they figure out that, that if we just keep moving towards Troy, we keep avoiding the werewolf, we'll probably meet the others along the way at some point, because they will understand that's what we're doing. So that is the plan. And since they have been, doing the nasty under the covers, and he is acutely remembered that he is a priest now that there's young kids in the company again. Things between Brother Diaz and Vigga are kind of awkward. Like they don't know who to be to each other when Sunny and Alex is there. And meanwhile, during this little spiel with Alex and Sunny has been kicked by a horse, so she's a bit incapacitated, her ribs really hurt. So Alex has been kind of, low-key taking care of her and tried to get him a horse so they could get out of town and, get ahead of the werewolf. And Alex also at one point kisses Sunny, so it's a little bit awkward there too, because Sunny kind of understands that, Alex made a move, and, if she wants to kind of accept, then she needs to make a move back, but she's not entirely sure how to do this because, circus freak and so on.
And then what happens is that they get confronted by the mercenaries, and the other werewolf, the Danish one, is there, and you think it's going to be like a clash of the titans, like, the Swedish werewolf versus the Danish werewolf.
Yeah, they're like, let me at them, and there's this intense hostility, and they're like, I'm gonna rip you to pieces, I'm gonna fucking flay you, I'm gonna rip your skin off. And then they turn into their wolf forms and go at each other, and suddenly it's like, wait, it's all fangs and nipping, and they're entwining, and are they rutting?
And they are.
And they are. Because as we all know, the moment the Swedes and the Danes clash together, it'll be love or war or both at the same time.
I thought that was a funny subversion of what you think is going to happen. And basically, they just kind of fuck off. And then the mercenaries, I think, either fight them or leave. I actually can't remember.
They reunite with Jakob during this fight. Jakob and
the gang gets back together.
They keep moving towards Troy. And after this interaction, Vigga is like, yeah, I've been keeping the wolf muzzled, but he's quite useful, isn't he? Like, he saved our skins a few times. She's built towards this this idea that she should keep a muzzle on the wolf, and that her life will improve if she's just more of herself. And that there is a way she can control the wolf, and things will improve for her if she does. But now that she's had a few fights where the wolf has actually been useful, she's like, oh, but the wolf it's been very good lately. I think I've tamed him. I think I've tamed the wolf.
I didn't get that impression super heavily, but that might be because I found her thought patterns confusing. Because I didn't get that impression as heavily, but again, that may just be.
It's kind of mentioned in passing. I listened to this book 2 times. And my mum listened to it too. Joe Abercrombie. My mum thinks you're very funny. If you ever see this, cheers.
There's a very funny scene where it comes out that Diaz and Vigor fucked, and it's really funny because it's just the way it comes out, and he's so embarrassed about it, but it's also like, I failed, but I can recommit to God, and everyone's like, twice? And Vigor's like, 3 times. Or some that kind of tenor of joke, even if it wasn't.
No, he says, if I am going to recommit to God, I must recommit to honesty. It was 3 times. And Viggo's like, 1, 2. Oh yeah, it was 3 times.
Yeah, that's what it was. Which is fun. It's weird though, because it feels like this plot line then just gets dropped. Like it yeah, like the two don't really interact for the rest of the book, even though I would have liked to see them interact at the end after we learn what Vigor does.
Oh yeah, this third guy that they fought just a moment ago was he thought he was the most special of the cousins because he had kind of coined himself to be the Angel of Troy.
We actually hadn't said, but yeah, they fought the third cousin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he had decided, I'm going to mix myself with the beast, but the beast is the beautiful wings he has all going all over.
Yeah, and this third cousin, he was leading the mercenaries and the werewolf who's been following the guys, because unlike his brothers, he felt that he understood that their mother's experiments were never meant for warfare. So he thought he was, the grand smart one who hired real thugs, and was also an angel because he has made of himself one of his mother's science experiments. So he has like giant wings sprouting from his back, and it's mostly useless. Like, they're just for show. He can barely get his toes off the ground, but it looks fancy, right? Looks really fancy.
I liked that. I like that there's a little variation in the brothers, even though they all kind of act the same way and talk the same kind of poncy. Like, I can't believe that you're so good at fighting. Let's do this honorably.
Yeah, I will be honest. I don't feel like we needed any of the brothers. Maybe the last one. The last one was kind of funny.
It's different. And so the other thing is that Balthazar is able to do something like really difficult by raising up like really, really old corpses. Throughout the book, Balthazar is like, I'm even more powerful than ever. There's a point where he combines two kinds of magic. And I wasn't quite sure what the point of that was. It didn't feel like it really connected back to his arc of like how he feels about his binding in the church.
It's a joke that back then they thought the four elements were of a completely different nature. So air, fire, earth, and the body Gaul. I think Gaul was the last one. And he is the first to kind of have the idea that maybe there is something that unites all these forces. Maybe they are not polar opposites, but there is a uniting factor between them, and they could, in fact, interact in magic as well. So essentially, he just did a chemistry, and without really knowing it.
I don't know quite how that ties into... We'll talk about it more at the end when we talk about his completed arc, because it changes right at the end of the book. They defeat the cousin. They then get to Troy. Maybe something happens before that, but I don't really think so.
No, I don't think so. They get to Troy.
Yeah, they get to Troy. And basically, once they're there, they meet up with her uncle again. They meet up with a lady who had been spying for her uncle, one of the handmaids of the old queen, who's like this very like statuesque, royal, elegant woman who has a conversation with Balthazar about like... he's very like kind of smitten with her and respects her because she actually kind of respects him a little bit. And she's like, yeah, no, the old queen, she was a bad person, but she had some grand dreams, ellipses. And I was like, okay, I know what the twist is going to be, but okay, let's keep going with this. And also Alex meets the third cousin, and the third cousin is like
the fourth cousin.
Oh, you're right. The fourth. I always think it's going to be three because of rule of threes, but you're right. It's four. And we think he's going to be terrible, but actually he wants to just marry her to get the throne. But in like a reasonable way. He's not like evil or scheming about it.
No, he's like, this is just going to be the easiest solution for both of us, love. Let's go along with it. We can have our lives on the side,
Because by this point, her and Sonny have been doing the sexing.
Her and Sonny have been getting together.
The devils are about to take off on a ship to go back to the holy city. But on their wedding night, Alex and the cousin are about to consummate when in breaks in the three handmaids she was assigned, and we find out that they were actually the apprentices of the old queen.
Yeah, so they start doing magic. Like one of them starts doing ice magic and turns the fiancé into a block of ice. And then when the other girl attacks, he shatters, so he's dead. And Alex just barely, by the skin of her teeth, manages to get out of the room.
Yeah, and then she goes off. She goes outside of a window and has to go climb because they're on a very large tower. And she lights a signal that's supposed to signal when the elves are going to come to attack. But she knows the devils will know that like she needs help. And they're all like, oh, we got to go back and save her. And Balthazar's like, no, we don't. That's not the job. The job, it was to get her here. I'm staying on the ship.
The binding is finished. It can't compel me to go back and rescue her again. And the others are like, okay, fine. You do that, dude.
We'll go back and save her. And basically, there's a coup in place by her uncle who brought her all this way so she could marry the cousin and then die. And this whole time, he was evil.
Oh, and he just had a worse claim to the throne. So only by getting her and all the cousins out of the way could he get to the throne. Ooh, big shocker, big shocker.
Yeah, you're like, okay. And they fight their way up the tower, and there's a point where Balthazar ends up finding the workshop of the old queen, and he's like, God, she was a genius. How did she do this? This is, she was innovating even off what the old Carthaginian sorcerers had managed to do.
Yeah, and he finds this machine, and he's like, that looks like it could possibly transmute the soul.
And you're like, oh, I wonder what the twist is that I already guessed. And the twist is that elegant lady is the old queen. She knew she was a traitor and switched bodies with her right before she died.
Yeah, and she married her own brother just to keep appearances.
And he's like, ugh. And she's like, when you've already created animal-human hybrids, a small act of incest is not that weird.
Yeah, it's
like,
just calm down, dude.
I actually really liked this scene because it's a lot of fun because she's hot and bitchy. But she also kind of respects him and he kind of is attracted to her. And there's like a fun tension because they're also both like, we know fighting would not go well for either of us. Like it would be a bit of a coin toss. So she's like, join the evil side. We'll find a way to break your binding. And he goes, it's tempting, but no, I know now that this is the real savior and I want to be by her side for what comes. Like I could be important.
Specifically, I could be important.
Yeah. Which I do think could have been interesting a little bit in the sense of like somebody found their faith, but what they decided to do with their faith was be mercenary about it. Like that is kind of an interesting, like a little bit of a message if it was explored a little more.
It's probably where we're going to go later on. I'm not sure, but I thought it was it was an interesting arc. Like Balthazar is one of the characters that have the more interesting arcs. Like he actually goes somewhere, he changes, he makes his own decisions. Like there's some agency to him, and he doesn't always do what is most expected.
Yeah, no, it's true. Of all the characters,
so he lets her go. By the way,
yeah, he lets her go, and she's like, "Peace, but don't tell people." And he's like, "Well, maybe." Jakob wins the way he always wins. By like almost dying and then not dying. Rickard trances some people and it works for a bit and then it doesn't, and he has to turn into some bats and fight them. The interesting part is that they release to fight the devils. They release like this giant monstrosity of animals, just all mangled together, which again is treated almost a little bit more funny than it is gross. Like you're told it's gross, but like
they refer to the chapter is called The Leftovers, and that thing is essentially that the leftovers piled together into a flesh monstrosity.
Viger goes and starts fighting it, because she's turned into her wolf and she just is like burrowing out of it and killing it. But there's no way to get her to stop. And so Baptiste is the one who goes like, oh, enough, Viger, start behaving yourself. And the wolf looks at her and she's like, oh shit, that didn't work. I should have quit after
Barcelona.
We cut to Balthazar's point of view and he comes down and finds that Viger killed Baptiste while she was in wolf form. And she's like, dead.
Yeah, it like ripped to pieces.
I thought what was going to happen is that maybe there was going to be some kind of a twist where he brought her up to the chair that can transfer consciousness, so that she would be like alive in somebody else's body. But it doesn't look like that happened.
No, and that would be a fake out death, which is not Abercrombie's style.
I don't know if it's a fake out death if you find out like the next chapter, but yeah, I'm okay with it.
It would feel fake out. It would feel like emotional manipulation for like the sake of feels. Like maybe at some point he's gonna necromance her. But obviously we know that it's not returning the soul to the body in the sense that if he had gone with the machine idea, like you suggested, then that would have been a way to transfer her consciousness into a new body. Whereas if he does a necromancy, then he's just manipulating the remains and the soul is still gone.
And so basically we then cut from that. In the aftermath, it seems like Alexa's going to be a pretty good empress. Diaz is now her high chamberlain or whatever that's called. And the
Chancellor. She appoints him chancellor, doesn't she?
I think she does, because he's like really good with paperwork, which is like a powerful tool. The abbess who sent them on the whole mission, Basilica, comes and they get confronted because she had known the whole time that Alex was going to die and what her uncle's plan was. And the abbess is like, oh, sometimes, I have to walk in the shadows so the savior can walk in the light. You think these devils are like fun people, but they're not. They have to come back with me. You can't keep them. And Alex is like, okay, fine, but you're going to have to give me a lot of money or something like that. We also, It's also revealed that Alexa was not the real princess the whole time. She was a fake one. She had met the real princess, and Alexia had taken her, like, she had, so there's an interesting thing where she says she took her pendant and she also burned the back of her ear where her birthmark was supposed to be, not because she planned to do this as a con, but just because she wanted to be someone. Which I kind of wish had been explored more, just the idea that any identity would be more than no identity for her.
There could have been a really interesting arc where because she mentions at some point her mother was a cheese woman who died. And after she died, Alexia's father brought her to the holy city and essentially told her, I can't afford to keep you. Off you go. And it could have been a really strong personal arc to investigate, to go into, the kind of bit where the old identity was she wasn't deemed to be worth anything, so her father dumped her on the streets of a city and let her fend for herself, and so she could have been searching for an identity. Any identity was better, like being a pretender princess, because she said she'd never even believed that this Alexia person actually was a princess. She thought it was all horseshit, but she wanted to be someone. Like, you could have written something rather powerful around that, and the loss of identity and how the world kind of churned her up and spat her out.
I think so too. I think there's something really interesting there. And I think also you could have then, from her viewpoint, had a lot of self-talk about like, no, I am the Princess Alexia, almost putting that like identity of she needs to take it on. And then at the end to find out that like, no, this whole time she's been deluding herself. She has been trying to play act this person because being someone is better than being no one, in the way that society makes poor people no one.
Yeah, like it was almost most important to her that she believed it, because once the pretense falls, then her entire self-image goes with it. And she has to ask the terrible questions of, what am I doing? I am no one. I'm not capable of this. Like, I'm not a princess. We just touch a little bit on it every now and then, but it's never investigated. And this kind of pulls back to the part where I said it felt like this book was set up to be a character study of these 7 characters or something, but then we just never really get to it.
That could have like played an interesting theme of like identity with like Viger. Is she the wolf? Is she the woman? Where did the two meet? So like there could have been a lot of more of that, and they're just, like you said, it seems like you're going to get a character study, and then it's actually just like 7 buddies.
I still think we will. I just think it didn't happen in this book, and that is, to not even get the beginning of it is a little bit disappointing. I will agree.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think to a certain extent this may just be a genre expectation. Like, we read Shadow of the Gods, me and Katie, like, I don't know, a few months ago, and that book was also like 17 hours of a prologue to the actual story. So like this may just be how epic fantasy works, is if you want to start with the story, just start with the second book.
Yeah, like traditionally epic fantasy does have this issue where the first book is a travel montage and the second book is a kind of the middle way where things start to set up, and then the third book is where the big fight comes.
It's true, and it may just be that I'm not as familiar with the genre conventions, and it may just be also a genre convention I'm not that happy with. Like, we read like a lot of romantasy, for example, and that has certain genre conventions I just don't like. And this may be one that I just don't like for epic fantasy.
I don't think you're wrong. Like, this book would have been more charming and the fun bits would have been more fun if it was just shorter.
The only 2 big things that happen after this is Jakob is Alexia is like, hey, stay, I'll give you this cool sword and you can help me.
You want to be my first sword? I have this legendary blade that was wielded by the savior of the Second Crusade, something like that. And he's like, to hold a blade like this, it would take a legend to wield a blade like this. This is one for the histories. And the past me would have jumped at this chance. The past me would have loved it. He would have grabbed it with both hands because he wanted to be that legendary person, which is why I have to say no.
I mean, I guess it tracks. I part of it is that
I feel like we haven't seen nearly enough of him to really understand why this, like, it doesn't, there is no payback. This feels like a pivotal moment where we are going to get some kind of payback for something that was set up. But I still don't actually know what Yakov did in his former life. I don't know exactly who the man he is running so hard from is. So it doesn't really mean that much to me that he turns down Alex, other than that, it's an inversion, because usually the swordsman would say yes.
I think part of it is the ending of the book as a whole. You think like, okay, they're going to all stay with her for the sequel. And the part of the inversion is that, no, they're not. They all have reasons that they have to go back. But you're entirely correct. I could not. We don't know enough about his tragic past to exactly know what he's atoning for and what he's turning down by doing this. So it was just one of the. I think there's some vague mention, that he did bad stuff as the Grand Master of some army, but like it's just not explored enough.
No, there's this hint that he became something of a big person. He became the grandmaster of an army, and being that person, he did things that he is not proud of. But it's so abstract that it's like, okay, dude, you don't want the thing you want, so you're gonna go back and be miserable instead. Great, awesome. Go ahead.
The other big thing is that Balthazar comes back and he's like, okay, I'm going to tell them about the identity of the lady. This will be really cool. And then the abbess is like pissed with him because he let the old queen go and run off. And so she's like, you're going to stay under the deck with the stinky devils. And he's like, oh, me? You don't understand. I now believe that the...
Yes, you don't need to compel me to do anything. I will serve her. I will gladly serve her. I will serve her with my soul. And the abbess is like, into the cage you go.
It's like, yeah, we don't care. You're still a bad person.
You're still a convicted heathen, you know?
And like, I liked that because, well, okay. So I liked it on the one level that it's like, yeah, it's kind of a fun subversion. But what I didn't like is that he then after this is like, all right, I'm going to find her again and break out. And it's like, okay, but what was the point of your arc then if you were just going to end up in the same place that you were at the beginning of the book?
A little bit. Abercrombie has this thesis that he investigates with a lot of his characters, that people always have this grand illusion of that there's going to come a pivotal moment, or they're going to make a pivotal decision, and then they are going to change their whole lives around. They're going to become a better person. They're going to do all these things that they have never done, like eat better and exercise and never waste money and, you know, open a savings account and all that stuff. And that type of change for most people fails because it is simply too big. Like, these goals of, you're essentially deciding to become someone else. You're not deciding to better the person you are. You're deciding to become someone else. And often that fails. And Abercrombie has this thing with his characters that they often come to a point where they're like, I'm going to turn my life around. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be everything I wasn't before. And often we see them fail. But that said, it did feel a bit like, oh, Balthazar, that was such a quick turnaround that, you know, it gave me whiplash. Like, why did we even waste the breath on the whole, I'm gonna serve her, I believe now, if you're gonna change your mind 2 minutes later?
Exactly, and it basically comes down to whether he's being flattered or not. And I think the thing for me is that it felt like he had changed but not changed, because he had changed allegiances, but he was doing it for kind of the same reasons. He still was like wanting, you know, acclaim and power and status. He just realized that working for Jesus would work. So he like kind of was the same person. And I think you're correct that it's a theme Abercrombie is interested in. But the problem is it's very hard to make interesting, or not very hard, but it's tricky to make interesting the theme of people don't change and make that an interesting story.
I think you can, but I don't think one book that mostly wastes time is the place to do it. Like, give us Balthazar beginning to believe that, oh shit, maybe this Pope thing is clearly a force so big that the Duke of Hell couldn't even break the binding. Like, there is something at work here, a force that is so big that I can't even touch it, and that means something. And let him kind of mold that through in his mind, and still being himself, still trying to come out on top. And then let's watch him sort of grapple with his decision to serve this force because he thinks it's the best thing for him, is still not an easy choice to make, because he gets put into the cage, and, you know, he could have conflicting feelings about what he's done and his, like, let's not completely immediately pivot to, I'm gonna break this binding, because that's just a repetition.
You know what it almost feels weirdly like? It feels almost like a prequel where they have to reset the character to where they were at the beginning of the first book, but like they had built this whole arc before that, because otherwise it would be boring. And like, so I think that's the last important thing that happens in the book, right? Oh no, there's an epilogue where we're introduced to the new person who's going to be in charge of the devils, and she seems interesting.
Oh yeah, but
that's kind of that's about it.
We don't even know who the second book is going to be about. So that really didn't strike me as very interesting in itself. Like, is this character going to be a massive character in the next book? Or it was funny because they are introduced the exact same way that Brother Diaz was introduced in the beginning of the book. So it's like the poor blue-eyed little duckling come into the chapel and they're like, oh, am I going to meet Cardinal Zizka? That's huge. Like, the Pope is 10 and, 10, a child, but Cardinal Zizka, that's where the real shit is happening. And then they get suckered into doing this job that Brother Diaz just got out of. So it's funny, but also I'm not sure what it means.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, okay. I think we've talked a lot about our thoughts about the book, and again, I think this is a book I'm going to remember fondly, and I am actually now interested that we've talked about it to read the sequel when it comes out, and I'm still interested in reading other of Abercrombie's work, but I just don't think this book hits it. I feel like this was him having a good time and his editor taking a week off.
I think The Heroes is going to be for you out of all of Abercrombie's books, because it's a lot darker. It's military fantasy, but it doesn't strike that note of nihilism that Best Served Cold struck. That was just a bit too much of a bummer.
That book is a lot, yeah. I'm sorry, guys, that we keep promising pistolas and them just being both very reasonable and accepting in both our criticisms and points.
Hey, there were pistolas. There were times I could have gladly strangled you.
All right. Have you guys read Abercrombie? Which one would you suggest that we read next? And as always, thank you to our parasocial darlings.
We love you. Bye.